Instructional Strategies, Phonemes Are Phat by Callum Lynch. To begin, I wasn't exactly sure how to narrow my focus, so I decided it was probably best to just identify some of the problems I experienced as an educator. Much of my previous work involved teaching those with learning disabilities and mild to moderate intellectual disabilities. These students ranged in age from 12 to 18 years and had very diverse needs as well as abilities. Generally speaking, many of my students had working memory and short-term verbal memory difficulties, and this directly impacted their phonological processing. Additionally, we know that the ability to read is a significant predictor of later success, but unfortunately, many teenagers who struggle to read believe they are also incapable, and as a result, they're often resistant to intervention and have a very poor disposition towards reading as well as writing. Adult literacy rates are measured on a scale of 0 to 5, with 5 being the highest level. Stats Canada shows that 1 in 7, or 15% of adult Canadians 16 years and older, are in the lowest level of literacy. Additionally, 40% of Canadian working-aged adults have literacy skills below the minimum level required for the workplace. For these reasons, this led to my overall question: what phonological interventions are most well received by secondary school-aged youth who struggle with reading and therefore require systematic, explicit, and cumulative remedial support for later life success? With many of my past students struggling particularly in the areas of phonemic awareness and phonics, I felt this was an appropriate place to start. In addition, my student volunteer for the particular activities also struggles with identifying speech sounds, phonemic manipulation, as well as phoneme, grapheme, and grapheme-phoneme associations. Having a good instructional plan means knowing where you are and knowing where you want to go. As it stood, my student was developing phonemic awareness as well as a transition into phonics. In addition to this, I would need to consider vocabulary development, reading fluency, and reading comprehension in later intervention. These domains are intricately connected, and we know that an effective literacy program should provide a healthy integration of all elements. Nevertheless, my presentation is going to focus on engaging activities for youth that specifically target that transition from phonemic awareness into phonics. Without a class of my own, I was only able to apply the following activities while working with the young man that I tutor. Therefore, the instructional plan was based on only meeting 1 hour per week. It should probably be said that effective intervention should be daily. I also encourage the use of apps and review of the activities independently to compensate for the minimal one-to-one support. For my student volunteer, I initially provided a diagnostic to correctly target the student need using the PRESS curriculum, as this is the tool I often used in my intervention. The activities that supplemented our regular instruction were determined by the student's level of reading skill and the profile strengths and stretches. Although I utilized various methods of intervention, for the purposes of this course, and because of time constraints, I will speak to a few selected activities I came up with, as well as some apps that supplemented elements of my instruction. I began with systematic practice of decomposing words into syllables and then phonemes, while also showing these linguistic elements in print formation. Educators who are teaching literacy to young adults are always encouraged to explicitly discuss the terminology of linguistics and language study. To conceptualize this, I introduced the digital sound wall. We basically began by defining the differences between consonant sounds and vowels and syllables and phonemes, etc. Throughout our various activities, including PRESS, we gradually introduced common consonants and short vowels, and we would collate these and put them into our digital sound wall. Using the Keynote app on the iPad, the student created a slide per phoneme. Each slide included graphemes, some examples, place, manner, voicing characteristics, or otherwise known as articulation features, and a video of mouth movements. This ongoing collection allowed the student to physically map speech sounds to letters, and then reinforce the connectivity of these seemingly separate elements. Another activity that was very well received included the repurposing of an app called Charades. Through this app, I was able to create our own custom word list. This began with one-syllable words, and over time, we gradually increased in complexity. Depending on the role, one player would ask for the number of sounds, initial, medial, final phonemes of the unknown word, while the other player would isolate these sounds to provide as clues so that their partner may guess the word. This activity specifically encouraged participants to identify all sounds in the word and either produce, segment, or blend phonemes by referencing to the written word. I encouraged the student to count out syllables of each word by tapping their thumb with each finger sequentially. This engaging and cooperative game would allow two players to simultaneously develop their skills using phonemic drills. In addition to these activities, I also encouraged my student volunteer to try out some apps that would complement the in-person teaching. If interested, please take a pause to find out more. As previously explained, our students who are significantly struggling with reading at a secondary level do not have a whole lot of time left to build up their skills before graduation. These language-based interventions need to be faithfully implemented and continue with a high standard of design and frequency. With reference to the Big Five, interventions should be systematically and appropriately increasing in complexity within each domain for the optimal growth of the learner. All in all, the activities presented in this video were very well received, and then both of which embraced a multisensory approach by simultaneously engaging the senses, including listening, speaking, moving, looking, and writing and typing. Research and resources focusing on early literacy skills for young adults has shown to be very limited. The common approach for secondary educators often seems to rely on simply exposure and very little direct instruction. This lack of response is likely due to the limited designated time for intervention, the student reluctance, and a general lack of awareness of how to teach a student to read. Given this, it is vital to provide the struggling students an alternative credit-bearing English course that can provide such concentrated instruction. From my own experience, educated professionals are skeptical towards intensive literacy courses at the high school level because they view this practice as segregated or non-inclusive. However, in my own opinion, identifying areas of challenge for particular students, in this case a lack of fundamental literacy skills, and actively addressing these concerns with them, is crucial for reducing barriers to accessing further education and opportunities. Ultimately, this ensures that students are more than able to act self-determinedly as they move forward in their own pursuits.